Pop punk. Some call it an oxymoron, some call it the worst genre ever, and many consider it to be their favorite type of music. No matter which of these categories you may fall into, one thing still stands: pop punk's divisiveness. But why? Why does a style of music that's so lighthearted and non-serious in nature garner so much negative attention? Pizza, friends, suburban life, and leaving your hometown are all common themes you'll find in a standard pop punk track. Very benign subjects that shouldn't be the source of why this genre is greeted with such ridicule. So is it the instruments, the lyrics, the singing? It just doesn't add up. Today we're going to take a look at why pop punk sucks, whether or not that's a bad thing, and how it can improve. AllMusic.com coins pop punk as a post-grunge strand of alternative rock that combines power pop melodies and chord changes with speedy punk tempos and loud guitars. Even though the genre hit its commercial pinnacle in 1994 thanks to groups like Weezer and Green Day, pop punk still kind of exists and sort of thrives today, thanks to groups like The Wonder Years, Neck Deep, and The Story So Far, to name a few. And I mean a few, because there are way more than you might think. So why does pop punk suck? Or better yet, why do people think it sucks? And why is it so often a target for scathing criticism? There's a lot to unpack here, but I think it's only right that we start from the top in order to figure out how we got where we are today. While most would agree that the Ramones were one of the first notable bands to combine punk rock with pop sensibility with their 1976 self-titled debut, one most likely wouldn't listen to that album and think to themselves, oh, this is the epitome of pop punk. But here's the thing, just the mere combination of punk and pop music was too much for many fans of punk rock, a line that should not be crossed. Many who listen to punk rock and participate in the culture surrounding it know that you want to be perceived as authentic and genuine as possible. In fact, it might as well be a contest. In other words, you want to be the most punk that you can possibly be. To be outed as a poser is worse than a death sentence in this culture. Never sell out and always do it yourself. Pop music is nearly the antithesis of this ideology. It's commercially appealing, it's sparkly, bright, and heavily produced. Since pop is and was heavily televised, pop stars had to have a visual presence to accompany their performance, one that directly juxtaposed the gritty, dark aesthetic of punk rock. Considering this, it starts to become more clear as to where much of the initial criticism came from and why it's still present today. But that's really just dipping our toe into the pool of contempt rife within the genre. As aforementioned, when people berate pop punk today, they're usually not referring to bands like the Ramones, but groups that formed many years after them. The finger is almost always pointed at bands that began gaining traction in the mid to late 80s into the 90s and even present day. Groups such as Green Day, Screeching Weasel, and The Offspring, extending all the way to modern groups like The Story So Far, Real Friends, and Neck Deep. These are the bands that embody the sound that leaps into your mind when you hear the word pop punk. High-pitched, nasally voices, eager to leave their hometowns and have music videos that look like this, and of course, this. Many individuals are quick to point out the fact that many of these groups have weak, unoriginal, and often repetitive instrumentation as well as boring, uninspired, whiny lyrics. Many take umbrage with how repetitive the subject matter tends to be, and to piggyback off that, not only are the subjects repetitive, but the way they're written about and the points of view / perspectives are very similar. The lyrics often read along the lines of, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me, she sucks, and now I'm sad, or my mom and dad just don't get it, and I'm going to let this small inconvenience ruin my entire day. I just wish I could leave this town with all my friends. For instance, the Wonder Years have a whole album called Suburbia and discuss what it's like growing up in the suburbs of Pennsylvania. Newfound Glory has their classic song My Friends Over You, and we can't forget the iconic line on Yellowcard's smash hit Ocean Avenue, we could leave this town and run forever. And then there's this band called The Story So Far that has written at least a few tracks about girls. To be fair, a lot of it is kinda whiny, and a reasonable person could see why someone would be annoyed by the nasally singing. Or maybe it's the basic lackluster instrumentation that bores you, or maybe it's the lack of perspective and short-sighted lyrics that make you cringe a little bit. None of this is that big of a deal in and of itself and would just be brushed off as mediocre rock music made for high school kids, but in the last 5 years or so, pop punk has earned itself an infamous reputation thanks to a few key individuals and instances. As if people didn't already have enough ammunition to hate on this style of music, it got so much worse summer of 2015 and and then on. The mantra "defend pop punk" would become more ironic than ever, as the genre would need much defending after this. But the kicker is, no reasonable person would want to defend this style of music after these events. Pop punk has earned itself a reputation of being filled with gross, sleazy, creepy dudes that often prey on those who support them the hardest. The first really big scandal documented in the world of pop punk occurred with Jake McElfresh, aka Front Porch Step, and the floodgates opened from there. He was initially accused of misconduct with an underage fan at some point in 2014, but the situation blew up to unprecedented heights after Kevin Lyman, Warped Tour founder, allowed him to play on Warped Tour 2015 to the dismay of many festival goers. This scandal was so huge that you could almost get away with saying that it bled into the mainstream, with figures as notable as Paramore's Hayley Williams chiming in on the situation. Many more situations like this would follow, with Neck Deep booting a member. There was that Moose Blood thing in early 2017 that carried all the way to last year, causing the band to go on indefinite hiatus. This Luke Rockets character supposedly did some really gross stuff and got canned from With Confidence. And finally, the Jesse Lacey explosion at the end of 2017 was basically the final nail in the coffin for the genre in terms of public perception. There were probably more events than the ones mentioned, but these are some of the most notable and impactful cases. But it's very important to note that these are the acts of a few individuals, and most of these bands are probably full of really decent, down-to-earth people, and it would be silly to assume that just because someone plays a certain style of music, they're somehow bad. You know what they say, one rotten one spoils the whole batch. Alright, so pop punk sucks, but is that a bad thing? No. In fact, it's a good thing. Which I know sounds very absurd to say, but just hear me out on this. Whether you're a fan or a musician, you have to start somewhere in terms of the music that you consume/make. And many young people often want music that they consider to be theirs, meaning not that Christian band that your mom loves or your dad's favorite classic rock band, but something that they can discover on their own, something that speaks to them on their level and has a different sound. For this reason, genres like pop punk and metalcore are frequently the beginning of one's musical journey because they're more geared toward the youth, they have lots of energy, and have themes that kids and young adults can identify with. This is just the beginning though. You'll slowly branch out into alternative rock, indie rock, rap, pop, hip-hop, you name it. And if you're young and watching this, trust me, I know this sounds crazy because there's no way you could have convinced 16-year-old me that I'd ever enjoy an artist like Lorde or Snoop Dogg. If you're at that point in your life where you only listen to pop punk, embrace it. It's not a bad thing. Pop punk can open you up to so many different types of music. Don't let people make fun of you for listening to a style of music that they don't think is up to par. Anyone who does this is either insecure about their own taste or has some other stuff going on. Just ignore them, brush it off, and listen to what you love. We all have different tastes that are constantly developing, growing, and expanding. Today, you love pop punk. Tomorrow, maybe you'll develop a love for freeform jazz. You just never know. And that's what makes music so fun and engaging. You never know what's going to pull you in and resonate with you. If you love it, listen to it. No one's opinion is more important than your own. Even though it sucks, and even though that's not a bad thing, you still have to wonder, can pop punk get better? Honestly, yeah, it can. I firmly believe it can. And the answer as to why isn't super complicated or profound, but I believe pop punk can get better just by musicians trying out different things and not being afraid to experiment, which is so much easier said than done in this world of music. Fans tend to be really picky and finicky when it comes to this style, and I think that honestly discourages a lot of growth and experimentation that could be happening. You don't want to lose fans, so you just play it safe. I think pop punk has a lot of potential regarding the genres that it can be fused with. There's this artist called Nothing Nowhere who does a great job of combining emo rap and pop punk to effectively produce emo rap for pop punk kids, and they eat it up. It's a really cool sound. I think younger people that are in that phase in their life where they only listen to pop punk are craving things like that. For instance, two really big bands in the pop punk scene right now are Turnover and Movements, bands that aren't even pop punk bands, but either incorporate elements of the genre or have just naturally progressed beyond it and still have bits and pieces of it forever embedded in their sound. If people were just a little more open-minded about change, I think this genre could have the potential to grow and flourish into something really interesting. And that's the thing, don't be inclined to like something just because it's different, but on the same token, don't just immediately write off the New Story So Far record because Parker isn't angry anymore. If you give it a fair shake and you don't like it, that's great, at least you tried. And I honestly believe that little things as simple as that could go such a long way to work towards improvement. The only limits this genre has are the ones that we put on it. Even though I've been fairly critical of it for most of this video, I'd be the first to raise my hand and say I love pop punk. I always have, and I always will. At 23, I listen to it and view the culture around it from a very different lens, but still have an appreciation and enjoyment for it. Growing out of music doesn't mean you have to stop listening to it, shun it away, and act like it's the worst thing ever. It's actually the exact opposite. You love it just as much, if not more. It's just the perspective that changes. Never stop growing, never stop improving, and be passionate in what you do, but never forget where you came from and look back upon it fondly, because it got you to where you are today. Thank you for watching.